Memily. There was a land, a marvelous, sweet-smelling land called the Jasmine Jungle, a land brimming with all the mystery of life and filled with the raucous sounds of all the creatures who lived within. It was here that baby leopards leaped. It was here that elephants of all sizes spritzed and sprayed the jungle with a fine watery mist, causing rainbows to dance from sunbeam to sunbeam. This was the Jasmine Jungle. In the middle of this land was a meadow, and in this fragrant meadow a small knobby-kneed giraffe was born called Memily. Normally, this would not have been such a special event, but until Memily was born, there were only 2 other giraffes in the jungle, Memily's father and, of course, Memily's mother. All the other creatures of the jungle gathered around and oohed and awed at the newborn baby. Memily spent the first few weeks of life in the Jasmine Jungle awkwardly learning how to walk about. As we all know, giraffes have long, lanky legs, and Memily was no exception. It took her a long time to learn to walk on legs so long. She would wobble about the meadow, bouncing off a tree here and a bush there as she struggled to gain her balance. Memily had a problem of sorts. She knew that she was a giraffe. There was no problem with that. She knew about all the dangers of the jungle, for her mother had taught her well. Memily's problem was that she didn't have anybody to play with who was her own size. One day she joined a bunch of bunnies in playing some silly forest games. She thought to herself, "What fun! I just love to play tag." Soon the bunnies tagged her and she was off chasing the elusive creatures all over the meadow. Memily felt just like a regular bunny, only a lot taller than the rest. The game started innocently, then ended in disaster. One minute, Memily was chasing the bunnies, and the next minute she tripped on a root that the others had jumped over. She flipped, she flopped, and landed in a heap right on top of all the little baby bunnies. One by one, the bunnies popped to their feet out of this jumble in the jungle, until the only one left in the pile of confusion was Memily. "Gee whiz, Memily," the bunnies cried. "You could have hurt us that way. You have got to play with someone your own size." With that, the bunnies hopped away, leaving Memily tangled and confused in the middle of the path. "Well," she thought, "I'll just have to find someone taller to play with." She struggled to her feet and galloped clumsily on her way, in search of new friends and new games to play. Now, Memily's only problem with finding someone her own size was the fact that Memily was still growing. Day by day, she was growing taller and taller. She tried to play with the lions, but they were too short and much too rough. She tried to play with the monkeys, but Memily had trouble walking on the ground, let alone climbing the trees. Finally, Memily befriended 2 zebras and an elephant who were playing a rousing game of hide-and-go-seek. They had no objections to letting Memily play, for, as you know, the more the merrier when you're playing hide-and-go-seek. One of the zebras counted to 10 while the others slipped away to hide. The elephant hid in the river with only his trunk sticking out like a reed. The other zebra hid in the bush where her stripes disguised her. Memily dashed this way and that, looking for somewhere to hide. She tried to hide in the water with the elephant, but she was much too tall, and besides, she didn't have a trunk to breathe through. She tried to hide in the bush with the zebra, but her neck stuck out like a weed in the willows. Finally, she found a place to hide, or at least she thought she was hiding. But when the other zebra finished counting to 10, he instantly spied Memily behind a pile of rocks in the clearing. Just where can a very tall giraffe hide? She She hid here, she hid there. Every time she thought she was hidden, the other animals would see her gangly legs or her long neck sticking out. Finally, the zebras and the elephant sadly said, "It's just not going to work, Memily. You're just too tall. You have to find someone your own size. Maybe you should just play with the trees." Then giggling, the three of them dashed deep into the Jasmine Jungle, leaving a sad Memily all alone with no one to play with. She searched high and low for someone her own size, but she could find no one. Finally, resolved that there was no one as tall as she was, Memily stopped trying to play games with any of the other forest creatures, or any of the other creatures of the forest. Week after week, Memily grew, and she became sadder and sadder. She was shy and embarrassed by her height, and whenever any of the other creatures walked by, she would turn her head, knowing that they had to look up just to look her in the eye. Memily grew and grew. She began to bow her neck and bend her knees, trying desperately to make herself shorter. Everything she tried was to no avail, for, no matter how much she bowed her neck or bent her knees, she was still very tall indeed. Memily was so embarrassed about being tall that she began spending all of her days hiding amidst the trees that grew at the edge of the Jasmine Jungle. She would stand for hours, munching on sweet leaves and twitching her ears so that the birds wouldn't build a nest on her head. But the birds would come anyway, twittering and giggling, and while standing on Memily's head, they would bend over, look her in the eye, and sing a silly song. "Who can you see taller than a tree? It's Memily, it's Memily." Memily would just shake her head, and the birds would laughingly flutter away. One day, as Memily was rustling through the uppermost branches of a very tall tree, she was shocked nearly out of her wits by the appearance of another head looking back at her from another tree. She looked once, she looked twice, and sure enough, there was another giraffe, just as tall as she. "Hello there," she said shyly. "Do you have to hide in the trees too?" The other giraffe laughed and walked over to Memily's tree in a graceful swaying motion. "No," he said in a gentle rumble. "I am not hiding in the tree. I am eating the sweet leaves that only grow at the very top. My name is Herschel. Who are you?" "Memily," she said as she stepped from behind the tree with her knees bent and her neck bowed. Herschel looked and laughed as Memily walked in her awkward way. "Why are you walking like that?" "I have to walk this way," said Memily shyly. "Otherwise I would be much taller than the other creatures." "But you are supposed to be taller than the other creatures," said Herschel. "It's the way of nature. Some creatures are tall, some creatures are small, but all have their place in the Jasmine Jungle." With the passage of time, Herschel taught Memily about being tall is not bad, and that in nature all creatures are special in their own way. Short is short, and tall is tall. You are what you are. That is all. That's the end. Please subscribe.